have to live in Panama long to know that it could be a nice sunny day outside and suddenly you find yourself caught in a thunderstorm. This past week at the COVID-19 pandemic spread suddenly. And just last week, it seems like we were pretty much enjoying the every normal day parts of life here in Panama. And then suddenly everything was turned upside down and shook up. We've gone from enjoying our favorite restaurants to exploring new places to eat in our apartment. Many of us had to learn how to do our jobs remotely, and maybe we like that because we can go to work every day in our pajamas. We've gone from getting our groceries to waiting in lines just to get into the store. We've gone from sitting with friends and family to seeing them on a computer screen. Everything about our normal lives has suddenly changed. And this past week, as I've talked with many of you, it has brought so many different kinds of emotions, you've said. There's been times of uncertainty and anxiety, times of panic, times of fear and anger, times of worry and times of sadness. And we've all experienced a wide range of emotions. And so how many different emotions have we been dealing with? This pandemic has made many people anxious and has caused many people to become afraid and to worry. And the truth is, all of us are afraid of at least some part of this pandemic. It could be you're afraid of your health or the health of a loved one. Maybe it has caused you to become anxious knowing that you are stuck here for 30 days. Maybe you're worried about having enough food or how you're going to pay your bills. Maybe when you look at the stock market, you're scared about your investments and your future. There's all kinds of fears and anxiety that all of us have had over this last few weeks. And all of those are genuine fears, but we also have those silly fears. You know what a silly fear of mine is? A fear that I'm terrified of? It's needles. Just thinking about them makes me a little queasy. Those little sharp things terrify me. But for you, you may be afraid of spiders or the dark. Maybe you're afraid of clowns. And those types of fears are real, but they also are kind of silly. It's not to say that those fears aren't real and they don't exist, or that anxiety is not real and doesn't exist. But for example, there's no real reason to be scared of the dark. There's no such thing as the boogeyman or monsters under your bed. But yet, if the lights go off, some of us are paralyzed with fear and anxiety. And there are genuine concerns we have. And then there's irrational fears. These are some of the things we need to be concerned about in life, but ultimately we don't need to worry about them. There is a difference between being concerned and worrying. You see, being concerned and worrying are two different things. I can be concerned about my personal health, but I don't need to worry about it. I can be concerned about my work, but I don't need to worry about it. I can be concerned about paying my bills, but I don't need to worry about it. Being concerned is solution-oriented. Being worried is problem-oriented. You see, worry distracts us. Concern focuses us. Worry makes us give up, and concern pushes us forward. Worry exaggerates the problem. Concern identifies the problem. Worry focuses on ourselves and is selfish, and concern cares for others and is selfless. I can be concerned about my work and my job and go and make adjustments, put a plan in place and move towards that place that I want to be, or I can worry about it. And in worrying about it, what I'm doing is I'm setting up hurdles and roadblocks that will cause anxiety and stress and keep me from going anywhere. Worry blurs our vision. Concern clarifies our purpose. I can be concerned about my health and make adjustments to protect myself and my family, or I can be worried about it and become anxious and spend way too much time and money thinking about it, avoiding situations, causing way too much stress in my life, and then it cripples me from actually ever doing anything. Worry exaggerates the problem, and concern identifies the problem. I can be concerned about my future, paying my bills, my investments, and I can make lifestyle changes, put money aside, and be prepared. Or I can spend my time letting the worry paralyze me from doing anything. Worry disables us. Concern enables us. This situation with COVID-19 is something that should concern all of us. But we don't need to worry about it. Unfortunately, fear and anxiety is causing people to panic and worry to the point where it's simply crippling them. We are spending way too much time and energy worrying about the things that we can't control. We don't need to be worried, especially if we are a follower of Jesus. Worry distracts us. Concern, it focuses us. Paul in Philippians is writing to a church in Philippi, and he says there are areas of your life that you're fearful of, and you don't need to be. There are situations that you're anxious about, and there's really no reason to worry about. And what we're going to see Paul say is that if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, you don't need to be afraid of those things, that you don't need to worry. In fact, Paul commands us not to worry. Now, what's interesting is where Paul is writing this letter from. He wrote this letter from the dingy, dark, confined prison cell that he was in. And you thought being stuck in your apartment and in your neighborhood was bad. Paul takes it to another level. See, Paul shows you and I that we don't need to be anxious, and that you and I, we can find peace no matter where we are. Whether you're confined to your apartment or whether you're stuck outside of your home country, whether or not you may have a job in 30 days, you don't need to worry. You can find peace. And Paul is in prison, and he's writing this letter to his friends who are outside, and he's saying, I'm in prison. I found peace. I'm locked up. I'm being mistreated, and I am not worrying. You're outside, and you're free, and yet you're caught up and paralyzed and worrying. Philippians 4, and then he says this to them, Philippians 4, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need, and thank Him for all that He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. And His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Jesus Christ. The Greek word Paul uses here for worry is merenate. It can be translated as needless anxiety. It's where we get our English word marinate from. If we want to add flavor or tenderize meat, we marinate it in sauce. We let it sit in it and soak in it and marinate for hours. And you and I, when we worry or merenate, we are soaking in fear and doubt and restlessness. And it leaves us with nothing but needless anxiety. There's a difference between genuine concern and needless anxiety. It's possible to be concerned and not be anxious. And this is Paul's attitude that he's writing from prison. And Paul says, trust God with everything. He tells us to go to God with everything. God knows exactly how you feel right now and what's happening all over the world. And especially if you're a follower of Jesus, then you don't need to worry because you have a heavenly perspective. And a heavenly perspective eliminates needless anxiety. And so what part of this pandemic is causing needless anxiety in your life? Is it your health, your job, your future? A heavenly perspective eliminates needless anxiety. And so how do we have this heavenly perspective? Paul tells us that through prayer and thankfulness, that we can go to God and tell him what we need and thank him for all that he's done. And can I suggest that one of the reasons that we are so anxious in life is because we're not thankful for what we already have. We're always praying for what we need, but we never stop to thank God for what he has already given us. Because we're just spending time telling God what we need. We don't spend time to thank him for our apartments or the food on our plates, the jobs that he's given us. And those are just the tangible, physical things that he gives us. But we need to thank him for Jesus and the sacrifice that Jesus made so that you and we can have a relationship with God. We need to bring our requests to God and thank him for everything that he's given us. We need to change our perspective to a heavenly perspective. I think we often forget that God gave it to you and to me, and that God can always take it away. And Paul goes on in verse 7, he says, you will experience peace which exceeds all understanding. And when we live this way, instead of worrying, and we pray about everything like Paul tells us to, we live with this heavenly perspective, and we receive the peace of God. And that peace, right now, especially with everything going on in the world, is going to look strange to everyone. It surpasses all understanding. Your neighbors and your friends and your family will be like, how can you be so calm at a time like this? How can you have peace with everything that is happening right now? There's a pandemic out there, yet you will be at peace because you know who's in control. We need to be able to separate what is a genuine concern and what is needless anxiety. And only wisdom will help us distinguish what is genuine and what is not in our control. James writes, if you need wisdom, ask for it, and God will give it to you. In the end, we all want peace. We want that peace that Paul is talking about. We want that peace in our future. We want that peace in our lives. We want that peace in our relationships. And instead, we need to pray about everything and trust him with everything. This pandemic and everything that is going on is out of our control. So you can spend your life worrying only to look back with regret. Or you can be brave through the storm and take control of your thoughts and your emotions. Each of us are experiencing our own little waves of fear and anxiety in our lives. And Jesus uses a storm to teach the disciples about a heavenly perspective. Jesus has just been finished telling his disciples about having the faith of a mustard seed. And he uses an opportunity to teach them something extremely powerful. As evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind. But as soon a fierce storm came up, high waves were breaking into the boat and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping in the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" And when Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." Suddenly the wind stopped and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" The disciples were absolutely terrified. "Who is this man?" they asked each other. "Even the wind and waves obey him." Jesus told his disciples that they were going to the other side of the lake. Jesus had been teaching all day. He was tired. He was exhausted. And so he fell asleep. But a storm came, and the disciples were terrified of the waves. They were terrified because they thought they were going to die. They were worried about their own safety. Sometimes God sends storms into our life. And so when those storms come up in our lives, we need to stop and thank God and take time to examine our lives. Because if God didn't send those storms, you would have ended up in the wrong place, going the wrong direction. Did you know the majority of the situations in our lives that cause the most anxiety are usually self-induced? Meaning we cause them. It's how we approach these kinds of situations that create anxiety and worry in our lives. We marinate in the fear, and it creates needless anxiety and worry in our lives. Here in our story, we see the disciples worried. The disciples woke Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" The disciples had forgotten something really important. They forgot what Jesus had told them. They forgot who had just told them where they were going. They forgot who was in the boat with them. The disciples looked around and they saw the storm and the waves, and they began to worry. They forgot who was with them and who Jesus was. God tells us in Deuteronomy, "I will never fail you. I will never abandon you." In Psalms we read, "The Lord is my helper, so I will have no fear." If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, how are you handling this storm in your life right now? Where is your hope? How are you showing God's peace to those around you? What are you putting your faith in? If you're a follower of Jesus, then we have nothing to fear. We don't have to worry about anything. Yet we are surrounded by people who are worried, afraid, and looking for hope. Right now, we are in a time where the world is looking at the church. And they are looking at how us, believers, are responding to this current storm. Are we responding with fear and anxiety? Are our words filled with panic and worry, or are they filled with hope? Worry focuses on ourselves. Concern cares for others and is selfless. My hope is that you are brave through this storm and know God in a personal way, so that together we can be salt and light to the world, so that together we can bring hope to those who are hopeless. I love what Paul writes in Romans 8:31. He says, "If God is for us, who can be against us?" And that should be encouraging to us. If God is for us, who can be against us? There are times when all of us are facing the same challenges. Yet, if our hope is not in Jesus, we will worry. But nothing can separate us from His love. It doesn't matter how bad this all gets. God always keeps His promises, that He is for us. He's not against us. It doesn't matter what challenges you're facing today, right now, or tomorrow, because God is the same today and tomorrow. You don't have to worry. You don't have to be anxious. This is what courage looks like in a world filled with fear right now. This is what hope looks like in a world filled with worry. And this isn't just cocky, this is just confidence that no matter what happens, we know God is in control. God is still king. And so the question is He still king of your life right now? Is He king of your heart? And take your fears and worries to God. Be thankful for all that He has given you. Be concerned about those who don't know Jesus, and share His hope with those around you. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all that He has done. then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and your minds as you live in Jesus Christ. Would you pray with me? Father God, I thank you just for this time that we can be together. God, and I pray right now for those who are filled with fear and anxiety. God, I pray that they would come to you, that they would bring all of those fears and all of those anxieties and lay them down before you. God, I pray that you in return would fill us with your peace and remind us that you are in control. God, I pray that as we self-evaluate right now about who is king of our heart and who is king of our lives, that we would recognize the areas of our lives that we have replaced you. God, I thank you that you are still in control. You're still king. Thank you just for the reminder that you know what you're doing, even when it seems like there's chaos in the world right now. Thank you for this reminder, and I pray all these things in your name. Amen.